Picture this. You're staring at your phone. You get a text, and it's just off. The usual warmth, completely gone. Or maybe you're in a normal, everyday conversation, and suddenly, you feel this weird, subtle shift in the room's energy. Someone who usually texts back in 5 minutes leaves you on read for 5 agonizing hours. Instantly, your internal alarms start screaming. You feel that heavy, sickening drop in your chest, right? You start replaying every single word you recently said, frantically scrubbing through your memory, like a detective looking for the exact moment you messed up. You instantly decide that this sudden distance is a direct, undeniable verdict on your personal worth. You are absolutely convinced you've lost your value in their eyes. Listen to me. You aren't weak, and you are not inherently broken for feeling this way. You are simply playing a rigged game using the wrong set of rules. The insecure mind has a terrible habit of reading other people's behavior like a personal performance review. You have been conditioned to look at every tiny external shift as a measure of your internal adequacy. Let's be brutally honest here. This is a devastating structural flaw in your mindset. It makes you highly reactive and deeply, exhaustingly dependent on validation. Today, we're going to completely dismantle this destructive mental habit. We are going to expose the exact psychological error that turns ordinary, everyday ambiguity into a massive, bleeding ego injury. To really get why you do this, we have to pop the hood and look at your biological programming. See, your brain is essentially an ancient survival machine trying to navigate a crazy, highly complex modern world. Back in the brutal ancestral days, social rejection wasn't just a bad day, it was a literal death sentence. If your tribe kicked you out, you were tiger food. You simply couldn't survive alone out there. Because of that brutal reality, your nervous system is hardwired to act like a paranoid radar, constantly scanning the environment for the slightest hint of disapproval. It wants to detect abandonment miles away, long before it actually hits you. Now, out in the wilderness, that primitive radar was genius. But in the complex landscape of digital communication, it becomes a severe liability. In psychology, this cognitive trap actually has a name: the fundamental attribution error. Here's how it works in plain English. We systematically judge our own actions based on our internal circumstances. If you're late to a meeting, you blame the insane traffic, right? But when we judge other people, we completely throw context out the window. We treat their external actions as absolute, undeniable proof of their hidden intent toward us. If someone is acting distant, your brain doesn't stop to think, hey, maybe they're just exhausted from a brutal workday. Nope. You automatically assume they are actively losing interest in you. This right here creates a catastrophic frame collapse. Your internal reality completely shatters because you've built it entirely on a shaky external foundation. You lack a solid, independent core. When you constantly take ambiguity personally, you trigger a vicious dopamine loop in your brain. First, you feel the sharp, agonizing anxiety of perceived rejection. Then, you desperately scramble for a tiny breadcrumb of attention to soothe that exact pain. My friend, this traps you in a brutal cycle of intermittent reinforcement. You literally become addicted to the emotional roller coaster. And the worst part? Society actually cheers you on. It tells you to be highly empathetic and constantly attuned to everyone else's feelings. But let me tell you a cold truth. This over-attunement actively destroys your perceived value. A man with a truly cold, rational frame operates from a position of profound internal scarcity. He knows his fundamental worth isn't some fluctuating currency. He understands that most human behavior has absolutely nothing to do with him. People are simply consumed by their own chaotic internal worlds. Let's drag this out of theory and see how this fatal psychological error actually plays out in everyday reality. I'll give you 3 practical insights. The first applied insight is what I call the extreme danger of the short reply. Picture this. You send a thoughtful, well-crafted message, and what do you get back? A single, sterile word. Cool. Okay. Your ego instantly hits the panic button. You translate this brief text into a catastrophic, full-scale loss of interest. You assume they're actively pulling away, rapidly demoting you in their social hierarchy. But let's look at reality for a second. They might simply be driving, dealing with a nightmare boss, or just feeling mentally drained. But your insecure mind, it doesn't allow for neutral explanations. You take a totally meaningless data point and weaponize it against your own self-esteem. Do you see how crazy that is? This reveals a massive lack of walking away power. Think about it. If a single short text has the power to destabilize your entire day, your presence holds 0 actual weight. You stop being a challenge and become an exhausting liability. Now for the second crucial insight, the misinterpretation of fatigue and daily stress. Imagine you're hanging out and the other person seems quiet or distant. They just aren't matching your high, eager energy. A guy who lacks frame control will immediately read this silence as subtle disrespect.
He might even go down the rabbit hole and view it as a covert manipulation tactic designed to test his limits. He internalizes their bad mood as a direct reflection of his own inadequacy, assuming his company just isn't valuable enough to elevate their spirits. Look, this is pure ego disguised as anxiety. You are literally assuming you are the absolute center of their emotional universe. The truth? It's much colder, but honestly, much more liberating. Their silence is almost always about their own internal friction. It is entirely disconnected from your perceived flaws. Let them be tired. It's not about you. The third insight is the illusion of inadequacy built on delayed gratification. Let's say someone asks for some physical space or takes a day to process their thoughts. Cue the panic. The highly reactive man instantly concludes that he simply isn't enough. He tells himself that a high-value man would never be put on hold like this. So, what does he do? He builds an entire dramatic courtroom out of a single, highly ambiguous clue. He acts as the judge, the jury, and the executioner of his own confidence, prosecuting himself without possessing a single shred of actual, undeniable evidence. This behavior broadcasts a desperate, suffocating need to control the outcome. It signals loud and clear that your emotional stability is entirely outsourced to another human being. That is textbook low-value behavior, and I guarantee it leads to a rapid loss of respect. Now, I have to call out something here. The modern self-improvement space aggressively pushes a very dangerous myth right now. Society loves to tell you that over-communicating your insecurities is the ultimate path to deep connection. They claim that demanding constant reassurance the second you feel anxious makes you look authentic and vulnerable.
Let me be crystal clear. This is a massive deception designed to keep you compliant and weak.
A man who constantly demands verbal proof of his value is just deeply exhausting to be around. He forces the other person to take on a second job as his full-time emotional regulator. And guess what? That completely destroys the natural tension and mystery required to maintain mutual respect. Let's look at 2 totally distinct behavioral profiles to see the difference. First, observe the man who operates without a solid internal frame. He senses a slight shift in someone's energy. What's his move? He immediately fires off a long, dramatic paragraph asking what he did wrong. When they don't reply right away,
He double texts a few hours later, trying to force a quick resolution. He completely abandons his own daily mission just to manage their perception of him. He is frantically seeking external validation to forcefully soothe his own internal chaos. The observer's brain instantly registers this highly anxious, chaotic mixed signal. In a split second, he transitions from being seen as a respected equal to a burdensome, needy liability. Now, observe the man who has genuinely mastered his internal mechanics. He encounters the exact same ambiguous behavior. He feels the same slight shift in room energy. He even recognizes that primitive, biological spike of anxiety in his chest. He is human, after all. But here is the difference. He applies pure, unshakable detachment. He does not write an emotional paragraph. He does not interrogate anyone about their shifting mood. He simply allows the silence to breathe. He understands that outcome independence isn't just a buzzword. It is the ultimate display of quiet power. He shifts his heavy, calculating focus immediately back to his own primary mission. He knows, without a shadow of a doubt, that his fundamental worth remains entirely intact, regardless of someone else's shifting emotional state. He maintains absolute frame control through the sheer, undeniable discipline of his non-reaction. Listen, you can't simply wish away millions of years of deep biological programming. You can't just positive think your way out of an anxious spiral. You must implement strict, unshakable practices to physically regain control of your perception. Think of these safe practices as structural guardrails for your mind. They completely eliminate the space for self-deception. The first practice is building a strict internal delay system before you are ever allowed to react. When a quiet red flag of ambiguity pops up, your primitive brain is going to urge you to seek immediate clarity. You must aggressively override this weak impulse. Force yourself to step back and ask 3 highly analytical questions. Number 1. What else could reasonably explain this specific behavior? Force your brain to generate at least 3 alternative scenarios that have absolutely nothing to do with you. Number 2. Is this a consistent, undeniable pattern or just one isolated moment? If it's not a repeating pattern, it does not warrant any reaction from you. Period. Number 3. What actual, concrete facts do I hold right now? Separate the cold, physical reality from the tragic, cinematic, emotional narrative you are desperately writing in your head. If you cannot prove it with hard evidence, you must discard the assumption entirely. This single practice is a game changer. It completely eliminates the chaotic, mixed signals that actively destroy your credibility. The second safe practice is the aggressive redirection of your attention. You have to stop endlessly chasing the notification screen. When you feel that familiar creeping urge to overanalyze a subtle shift in tone, pivot your energy instantly. Direct that intense focus toward the brutal friction of physical training. Pour that massive mental energy into optimizing your financial strategy. Dedicate that blocked-out time to mastering a complex new skill. Make your attention incredibly scarce and genuinely difficult to access. A high-value man operates from a state of massive internal abundance. He is simply far too focused on building his own empire to sit around dissecting the ambiguous moods of other people. Let me tell you, your focus is an incredibly dangerous weapon. Stop pointing it backward at your own insecurities and start pointing it forward toward the quiet, relentless execution of your daily habits. You have spent years playing the exhausting role of the anxious detective.
You've drained your energy trying to decode every minor fluctuation in human behavior around you. You truly believed that if you were just perfectly vigilant, it would somehow protect you from abandonment or disrespect. That you now clearly understand the hidden mechanics of this silent failure. Your constant vigilance is exactly the thing that destroys your perceived social value. It's ironic, isn't it? The most dangerous threats in your life are very often the ones you invent completely in your own mind. Real maturity begins the exact moment you stop turning every unclear signal into a definitive statement about your worth. You are no longer a reactive pawn at the mercy of shifting daily moods. You now possess the cold, rational framework required to step back, detach, and just observe. Respect is never, ever successfully negotiated through desperate questions or highly emotional paragraphs. It is slowly and silently accumulated through undeniable behavioral consistency. You have the ultimate, unbreakable power of outcome independence right at your disposal.
So the next time you face a wall of silence or a vaguely cold response, you have a critical choice to make. Will you surrender your internal frame and beg for clarity? Or will you silently return to building your own reality?